Raindrops falling on the street. I can't recall when I last saw the sun. Summer's just a memory, a faded piece of
history. Another episode of the Woah Show, powered by Great Lakes Beach Shop. Make sure you go visit Bud and the gang. You know, he just won his first feature at State Line, so shout out to good old Bud Watson. But hey, a lot of his customers are winning a lot of races, so they must be doing something right out of that shop. A couple other sponsors we'd like to thank: 1063 The Mountain. They are our marketing partner for the 5th anniversary Woah race. So thank you for those guys for helping us out, getting the word out, spreading the news. Close Racing Supply also provides a lot of great parts that they manufacture themselves, and they also have a bunch of parts from nationally known distributors and manufacturers. So make sure to check out them. You know, it's about that time where we starting the grind of big money season around here. So make sure you go visit them. Make sure you're ahead of the game. Also, Martin Dynamics is your place for suspension and shock packages in the area. A lot of your favorite drivers are using Martin Dynamics to visit Victory Lane every weekend. If you look through all our Victory Lane pictures, their logo's on half of them cars. And Carpy Print Company, they made this big good old hat right here. They do our shirts. They make some of the best wraps in the game. Visit Carpy's today. They help us out a ton. Again, their hats, they fit my big head. You gotta go try out their hats. And it's time to get to the good part of this show. After we get done gassing up all our sponsors, on today's show we have a certified girl boss. I think that was what I've been thinking of, how to introduce her to the podcast. The World of Outlaws late model series photographer, Emily. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. How about yourself?
It's going good. Coming off a busy weekend myself. I don't know how busy you've been. You know, I know you travel all over the World of Outlaws. And when we'll get to that for a second, but how did this all start, as in how'd you become the World of Outlaws photographer and, you know, got involved in this? How'd you just start picking up a camera, and what kind of got you started? Like, what made you go, cameras? Because I always find it interesting what people, you know, what they wanted to start with, like how they got into it.
Oh my goodness. I've always had an interest for photography. When I was little, I had this little like point and shoot Nikon Coolpix that I took with me everywhere. I didn't pick up my first DSLR till I was in senior year of high school, so 2016, 2017. But I ran with that little point and shoot everywhere, and then transitioned to, we all had little 4th gen iPods that first thing with cameras, so everyone had one. My first DSLR was a Canon T6. My parents had gotten it as like a Black Friday special, and they're like, oh, this is just a phase. Like, borrow ours, run with it, and then get out of your system. Well, it never got out of my system. I just kept developing from there. And next thing I knew, I had my first Nikon, went back to the original brand that I was running around with as a kid. And so I had a D750, and then now I'm onto the mirrorless. So running with the Z8 everywhere.
You know, it's super funny because I have this conversation a ton about Nikon and doing action stuff, because I shoot with Nikon. I have a couple of friends that shoot with Nikon. However, I have a couple of buddies that started at Canon and then they moved to Nikon, and they're just like, these things are just built so much better for what we do, at least motorsports. I mean, what inspired your change other than, hey, this was the brand that I started with?
It really was just this is the brand I started with, and then so we have this. I'm gonna do a little plug to our local camera store. It's called the Camera Company in Madison. That's where I went back to get my first like official DSLR that wasn't like family owned, and they said that Nikon had the better low light performance with the glass. So with coming into racing, and even before racing, I was shooting livestock shows. So I come from an agriculture background, and in there you have a lot of poor lighting environments. So I just was like, for the time, I was like, well, I'm going to go switch back to that. And I've always trusted Nikon. And if Canon, if they would have told me Canon was the better option, like I would have stayed with Canon. Like, and in the grand scheme of things, there is no perfect camera. I could pick up a Canon and shoot. I could pick up a Nikon and shoot. Haven't tried Sony yet, but I have a lot of friends who shoot Sony and swear by it. So it's really not so much what brand you're shooting with, it's how you use the technology to your advantage. So for me, that's just always been Nikon. But honestly, if I picked up a different camera tomorrow, I'd still be able to do my job. So
Yeah, I mean, just those little tiny differences, though, that do make, with your styles. I find, like, Nikon's really good for action. The only time I've ever touched a Canon was with one of my friends who shoots a lot of portraits, and the colors on that thing are just fantastic. I'm so jealous. And they also have. Sorry, we're getting all nerdy about cameras right now. This I could talk all day about. They got like some different some ranges, like some lengths on them that I just wish that I had something in Nikon, like 100 to 300 2.8. Give me that. Give me that, please. I just give me that extra length. But and Sony
see, I
was
need Nikon to
my
create a
bet.
300 prime in the Z's.
Yes, and that's why I didn't when I
Oh,
made
sorry.
my next camera purchase for this. I didn't go mirrorless because I'm like, I'm gonna have to buy all new stuff for it to work really good, and I just wasn't there quite
Mm-hmm.
yet. But I picked up an 850. My mentor shoots Sony, who Craig Melvin, who I don't think I've really mentioned him either on this show or other interviews I've done, who just like I think I touched his Sony once, and I'm like, it's that's a different world right there. But so you said you started with livestock, which is funny because I didn't start right away with racing either. I actually was kind of a late bloomer into actually getting into my, I wouldn't say racing phase because this hasn't ended. But I shot like concerts and other low light level environments like that. Especially the college that I went to before they got all this new lighting the last couple of years was we used to call it a barn. But how do you think that kind of sets you up for doing what you do now? Because if anybody, this might be shocking news to some people that are spoiled in our region with a lot of light at our racetracks, but racetracks are some of the darkest places on earth with lights.
Oh, you can say that again. Like when I go back to snowcross in the winter months, I am blessed to have that white snow to bounce the light back off. Um, yeah, it just helped me develop my settings working in those barns. Like I know we had like lights over top, but sometimes you'd have like doors open, so it'd be sending in weird backlights, and just at night, those barn lights just would not do it. So it helped me develop my settings, and it was an easy transition coming into the racing world because I already had that in the back of my head, like, okay, I do need to use a little bit of a higher ISO to help compensate. You're dealing with sometimes weird yellow lights, helps you post production as well as pre production, like saying that white balance. So it was just like an easy, smooth transition into the racing world. The only really difference was changing up the shutter speed settings because sometimes you really want that fast look, like you have to slow it down and bring your arms in balance when you're shooting at like that 130th 140th shutter speed versus in the livestock world you kind of want to more freeze the moment, so you're using a higher 1/640th 1/800th up to that 1/1000th range.
Yeah, I low shutter pans at some of the places around here. I know you did Marion Center, which is always really good with all the people on the front stretch, slow pans and stuff. And Raceway 7 a little bit. But man, there's nothing like it when you got a good background with lots of colors. So all right, back to the racing thing. How did you make that, like why did you make not why did you make that transition, but how did this happen? What got you into doing more racing and things of that nature? Because I always find it super interesting. Again, because knowing my background, I just showed up with a camera once at the track that I shoot at right now was my first real like full time track gig, and then all of a sudden I'm the track photographer here like 2 years later. So
Oh boy, the story. So my best friend, her name's Jordan Hattie. Her dad Tim was racing our local 360 series. Back in 2020 was my first time bringing my actual camera to the track, and essentially before coming into racing photography, I was supposed to go to school to be a large animal veterinarian. So I was studying at UW-Madison, going for animal science, getting ready for that next step. When COVID happened, and they didn't really consider us students like essential. So I was just bored at home, and my friends like, pull out your camera, like, we're going to the racetrack. That's when I went to Plymouth and Plymouth Dirt Track, fell in love with it from there. I was taking on a minor in photography at Madison, so one of my projects had to be a semester-long project. I chose to do in racing. Find the behind-the-scenes moments. I was interviewing drivers to kind of build this story together. Next thing I know, the next season, I was shooting for Plymouth Dirt Track with the local 360s, the Grand Nationals, the late models, all that kind of stuff, and it just exponentially exploded from there. Some of our 360 guys transitioned to the 410 series, which is the Interstate Racing Association, or IRA, bumper-to-bumper sprints back home. I reached out to their president, asked if there was an opportunity for me to come travel with them so that I could follow my drivers up to that next step. And yeah, so then I was shooting from the IRA for a season or two, and that's where I met some other photographers. Like, the networking in this industry is incredible. Like, that's where I met photographers who knew people on the outlaw swing, and they're like, hey, we can't make this race. Can you, if we pass your contact info, could we ask them like to use you? And so next thing I know, I was shooting at Beaver Dam Raceway with the World of Outlaws and Shark Racing. So Logan and Jacob, and it's just been incredible. Like, the journey, the people I've gotten to meet. Like, I mean, I met you at Marion Center. Like, there's so many cool people in this industry. So sorry if I kind of went on a little tangent there, but like, I think that's what kept me in it too, is like the people. It's not just the race cars for me, it's the stories, the people. Seeing everyone's journey to racing just inspired me to stay with it. And then I got the opportunity with the Outlaws on the late model side, which I'm so freaking blessed for it. Like, oh, I could geek on it about all day long. Like,
it is the dream gig, right? And I think that's when I reached out to you and we started talking about, hey, what do you want to talk about on this podcast? Which I'm very thankful for you coming on, because, you know, especially like the photographer for the series that in our area, it's like, not to say it's the end all be all, but when the World of Outlaws come to town, it's the show. I got the Connor Bobick Memorial shirt on, and you know, just, it's like this big deal, and it's always been this big deal when the World of Outlaws come through. This has always been a predominantly, you know, late model series, so it's kind of cool to be like, hey, you have the gig that, you know, however many dirt track photographers there are, there's 3 or 4 in the national series that travel, you know. And those, you know, opportunities are super limited. And to go back to the when you're talking about the people, that's definitely why I'm so still in it and trying to, you know, do the exposure of the people, not only in the race cars but behind the scenes, because we have a lot of great people in this industry. Definitely not just the drivers, but the crews, the people that make the racetracks happen. Endless stories. And I know probably some of the racetracks that you've been to this year, if only the walls could talk, right? You know, how many things that no one's known about, or, you know, all these little tiny things that you get to hear when you go place to place. And with that being said, though, so first year you're traveling, you know, all across God's green earth now across the nation, making, you know, you went from a regional series, you went from, you did it all. You did the entire show up as, hey, this is gonna be a fun thing to do, track photographer, regional series, and now you're, you know, you're at the top. Some of the things I would like to actually ask you about is more of how about like the travel and trying to kind of adapt to all these different tracks, because I'm blessed. I get to shoot at the same handful of tracks around here. I can only imagine that it's quite the challenge to figure out some of these places.
You can say that again. It's definitely, but I look at it as a positive for the challenge. getting to show up to a new track, it's God's canvas. You get to basically run with it. And besides for the like required shots I have to turn in for the series, they kind of tell me, hey, we hired you on for your creativity. Like, don't be afraid to go get group shots, go get behind the scenes. Like, don't look at it as like a quota, but like go creative, hog wild. And actually, if you look at the schedule, compared to like what I've shot in the past, I think there's only 5 or 6 tracks that I've been to before on the late model tour. And I'm actually getting to do some work with the American Sprint Car Series now that they're part of World Racing Group as well. So that's even exponentially more tracks that I've never been to. This weekend, I was actually down in Kansas at Rush County and Dodge City Raceway Park. That was just stepping in, and I think that's where I get super excited. It is a challenge because you only get one night to essentially get all the shots you need, and your brain is working on overdrive, trying to like imagine scenarios. And next year it'll be easier because I'll have those. I keep a little journal with all the notes, like, okay, this worked, this didn't work, this lighting's here. But even then, tracks always are making improvements to them, so it changes up from year to year. You might have a new fence, a new wall, different lights. But yeah, I always go into a track with a big smile. I'm like, okay, let's start painting. And I don't really see it as much of a challenge as more of just a fun way to try something different.
I like to, so I shot for a series for, I did like full time for like a year until I took my local tracks on. I kind of went reverse, right? I started just kind of popping all over the place. A couple places had me on their permanent list, and I just kind of like grind my teeth and figure everything out. Then I went on tour with the ULMS, and super grateful for Chris Zuber, who brought me on and saw whatever he saw in me. I was just like this young kid who I was like sleeping in my car because it wasn't anything like traveling across the country and getting paid for it. It was just out of the love of following this regional late model series around, and that's when they really went all out. They really tried to go, they really traveled a lot, and like seeing some of these cool places that I've only been to once, and that was with them. It was really cool to be like, for example, at Greater Cumberland, which is now something else. I don't know what the name is. It just finally reopened, but there was this bridge over like turn 1, and I'm like, I think I'll get yelled at if I stand up there to take photos, and then I didn't. But it all worked out. But those were so super cool. Traveling around with them. So yeah, I kind of miss having new tracks to go to. I'm slowly running out of new tracks to go to that are within driving distance. So it's super cool. Something, even though you kind of had this like super accelerated path to like from like level 1 to the World of Outlaws, what is some advice that you would give to any photographers that may be trying to get into racing, or like, because I always say, like, taking pictures of the cars is like half the battle. And if you see some of the stuff that you post on your Instagram and things of that nature, I'm just like, I don't get jealous of other photographers. I don't know what's a better word, but I'm just like, I wish I could capture these moments like this. So yeah, like advice that you would give to up and coming people into the industry.
I would never say jealousy is the word. Envious might be the word, because I still have moments where I'm looking at JC Norgard's photos or Dave Olson, and I'm like, oh my god, they just pull out of the box and go way into left field, and it's like what they do is amazing work. So like it's not so much being jealous, but like looking at other people's work and inspiring yourself to work even harder to get that next step. The advice I'd give to people is don't be afraid. When I first started out shooting at Plymouth, I was the literal chicken of the group. Like I would shoot from far away, like rely a little bit on cropping and zoom to hit the moment, but not being afraid to talk to people and like build those connections and finding the spots. So like just if you have fear, shove it away. Like you can still have it, but like the fear also helps drive you. It's a driving force to build and just not relying solely on the camera. Like, moments come from the people. It's, oh goodness, I'm probably on a little rambling. Like, I'm trying to think of the right word to put it, but like, you can only do so much with the settings you have and the camera gear you have. Building those relationships with the drivers, with the families, is really, like, it helps you build moments. Like, I'm constantly asking drivers, hey, what do you want to see done differently? What do you want to see attempted? So like, just communicating with your clients and your racing teams and your series on what they want helps you turn your work around and like improve to what everyone wants to see, while still like following your own passion for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I always say, um, go. I usually always tell. So I have two photographers that work with me because we have so many responsibilities and we can't cover everything. And I'm always like, listen, go where people aren't. Like if we're shooting, say, the World of Outlaws, if there's like 27 not, I'm just exaggerating, but if there's a ton of photographers down here, go somewhere else, try it, even if it might be a little harder. And race car drivers are more afraid of you than you are of them because they are afraid of cameras. And I love telling this story of Wyatt Scott, who told me every time you put a camera in my face, I always look down or to the left or to the right, like never at the camera. So there was one time where we were kind of like the front stretch of like Freedom or something, and I'm like, all right, look at me. I'm like yelling at him, like, look at me. I got him to look at the camera. So that's always good. Yeah, in those moments behind the scenes, I think if we can stress that enough, I think there's not enough of that in our sports. Like, and I forget who I saw said it, is, anybody can take photos of cars on the track, but let me see what you can do in the pits. That's where the real challenge is. And I think that's where like a lot of the real emotion is too in the sport, if you want to see things unfold. So I got one more question for you, and then we'll wrap it up here. So, doing this traveling schedule and trying to balance everything and editing and being on the road and things, um, so I'm sure with the regional series you got a little bit of a taste of it. But what is it like traveling on the road, being 100%, you know, like you got to be dialed in being on the road at any given time, probably, right? To be editing, late nights editing, and then you have to turn around, travel the next day. I guess what is kind of like the grind of being on the road, like when you're doing this for a national series?
It's definitely not for the faint of heart. There are days I'll be 100% honest, I question my own sanity, but I guess I never was sane to begin with. Like, most people say normal is the 9 to 5 job. So, I love the idea of travel. I have been out of the country, New Zealand and Canada. So I guess I still got to make it over to Europe. But travel's never scared me because of the idea that you get to see new people, like the crowds, the fans. Like, I find myself talking to people in the stands, asking them their stories, what brought them to the dirt track. So, like, but I'll be honest, you got to prioritize sleep, have a good schedule. Like, if you looked at my calendar, it has like tabs everywhere, like just telling me, okay, so I have this race here, calculating the fastest route, and then finding time to edit in between. I'm also very blessed that our series director kind of has a little workspace for us media people. So in his toter, so me and our PR guy Matt Skipper, we usually have powwows in the toter, figuring out like what shots he needs first, and the series understands like I can't always turn over a 300 or 150 shot album in a 24-hour period if I have to be at 4 different racetracks in 4 different days. But they build those little breaks into the schedules that it gives us time as media to catch up. My family's been very supportive with me on the road, so they're constantly checking in, making sure that I'm not like dead in a ditch somewhere. The series travels together. I know the one day we were in Path Valley, and 2 days later I had to be at Millbridge to help with Extreme. So they have a series photographer, but then I'll just go help add extra photos to the collection since we were racing North Carolina that weekend. It didn't make sense for me to travel back to Wisconsin. And so I followed the Toyota Pace truck all the way to North Carolina. So like we travel in groups. that really helps. You're always with the same officials and fan experience and announcers, and so you just build that relationship, and you lean on each other to be able to handle this kind of schedule, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's got to be,
Hope-
I when I was traveling, and it was only on the weekends, right? And I had my full-time job during the regular week, but the grind of it all, I can only imagine when it's like full-time, go, 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 traveling. So popped up. I said that was the last one. Ha, I lied. I got a couple more that popped in. So far, out of all the tracks that you've shot, what do you think has been your favorite as a photographer? And you don't have to say Marion Center, because let me tell you, you don't have to make all the people at home listening to this that are from my hometown, home area. You don't got to make them happy. You can say whatever you want here.
Oh my goodness. And don't be afraid to ask. I'm a talker. I'm an open book, so I'll answer any extra questions that pop into your head. I'm gonna go based on series because I've hit so many tracks in my lifetime, and I've also done snowcross. I've done a little bit of asphalt in my racing career. I even did one race with Superbikes at Road America. That was so cool. So okay, we will go with late models, and you're gonna laugh because you said don't say Marion Center, but at this point I'm gonna say Marion Center, and I actually did tell that to my series, the officials in the series. The beautiful backdrop with the rolling mountains, like that was, and you guys had a beautiful sunset that night. You had a packed crowd, like heck, I'd say that entire PA Raceway 7 swing was probably my favorite so far. Like it just, for a late model, that there were cool battles. Like Chris Madden went 21st to first. I haven't only seen that once in my lifetime where someone came from the B, won the A, and that was in sprint cars in 360s. So I know you told me not to, but I'm either going to put it as Marion Center or that entire PA swing. And maybe that'll change throughout the season because I still have 1,000,001 tracks to go to for late models. But right now, you guys had I went creative overload on that track. Like it was so cool to be at. For sprint cars, I'd have to say Knoxville Raceway. We're going with the crown jewel. Even though I'm a sucker for half miles, my home track was Dodge County Fairgrounds. And that is just like 1 minute difference than Beaver Dam Raceway. But I love that Fairgrounds. That's where I grew up showing. That's where my first ever race, like just attending as a fan, was at Beaver Dam Raceway. Or now I'm mixing up. Dodge County Fairgrounds. I think Tony Stewart might have been even at that race, if I remember right. Now my friend's going to call me and be like, nope, you said that wrong. But I remember there being rainbows. It was a cool battle at that track. So, like, I am always a sucker for half miles. So when I got to go to my first Knoxville Nationals, that was nothing can beat that. With the exception of maybe the pace truck ride at my first World Finals, but that's like a moment versus an entire track. And then I will do a plug to snowcross. Favorite track would have had to have been Lake Geneva, my first year ever shooting. I am very sad because the last 2 years we didn't have it 2 years, or in that middle year they didn't do it. They replaced that with Houston Speedway, which was also really cool. I had gone there for dirt. Also, if you just heard thunder, I am sorry. We have thunderstorms rolling through the area right now, so my signal probably isn't the strongest. But yeah, just like, I guess shooting on credentials, Houston's would have had to have been the best, just because then this year we didn't have snow in March. Like Geneva got canceled, which was a very sad moment in history for all of us. But yeah, if got any other questions on tracks, I can geek out all day long on tracks. Like anytime I get to go to a racetrack, whether it's my favorite track or not my favorite, I'm always
I
smiling.
will say down there in that Marion Center area, because I've always said that it blows my mind how many racetracks they have in that tiny little area within a half an hour like stretch, because they have Marion Center, Hummingbird, Hidden Valley's another one that's a really neat little bowl ring down there to shoot. And but Marion Center sunsets, it's there, and Thunder Mountain has like the same kind of setup where they're up on top of the hill, overlooking all these other hills, and like you just have this clear ah ah. It's and you just gotta time it just right. Oh, it's so good. I can go on and on. Thunder Mountain.
You're
When
making
I
me.
first started, Thunder Mountain, and that's where the the Connor race used to be, for the World of Outlaws, and then before that it was the ULMS race, and before that it used to be. It's all over the Derek's podcast episode when he talked about it going all over. It's been a couple tracks. I first started going to it when it was at Thunder Mountain, and the sunsets, the views. Thunder Mountain used to be. I used to leave work on like a Friday and just haul right down there just to get there in time to shoot there. It's so good. Yeah, but they have a lot of good sunsets down there. It makes it for a good time. So you're talking about
You got me
when you
excited
go in
now
there,
because I
and
think I might get to go to Thunder Mountain this year. So I think it's July. They reschedule the date now to Thunder Mountain. Correct me if I'm wrong with Big Blocks.
No,
as Super
this
Dirt
is
Car Series.
no, this is Thunder Mountain, Pennsylvania, not New York. So this is the Pennsylvania
I was
Thunder
gonna be like
Mountain.
New York.
No, Thunder
Okay, fair
Mountain,
enough.
New
Sorry,
York, which
I
is a track
didn't
I
realize there were
haven't
two
been
Thunder
to.
Mountains.
It gets confusing.
Okay.
It's honestly, I always have to remind myself because I have a lot of friends that live out there that run big blocks, and I'm like, oh yeah, Thunder Mountain, and they're like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, no, the one that we race, and I go, no, the one that we race. It's always good. So
That's fair. I mean,
let's talk about the fan Emily real quick before and let's call you out
okay.
here. Let's see if we can upset some people. Who's your favorite driver that you've ever seen race?
Bill Baylog. I openly admit that to everyone. Bill Baylog, and it's not for the reason that everyone thinks. He when I did that first project in junior going into senior year of college, and it was my first year ever at Plymouth Dirt Track. I interviewed him, and he told me something that just inspired me. I won't go into all the sappy details, but yeah, it just inspired me to become the photographer I am. I mean, every photographer I've also met and my mentors and all that have even pushed me with my craft, but like that one day always sticks with me, and I have that quote framed in my room next to a picture, one of my favorite pictures of him from Plymouth Dirt Track. So, yep, I'm really gonna piss off all the drivers that I've ever shot for. Bill Baylog every time.
It's good. Everybody makes fun of so our page locally. I always say that we have our drivers that we've like kind of fangirl over, and we use the page to kind of we have our drivers, and I mean we are on the sides of race cars like with our logo and stuff. But the first ever person like and I'll say this is even though I can't say, oh, my favorite driver to watch of all time, but I go out of my way to make sure we go and take photos of his races and stuff. But Austin Hauser was the first person that ever put the Woah Nelly sticker on the car, the first ever person that really put us on a race car in a prominent spot. And I'm like, we always make time. And I could watch him drive all day, but it was just, the support and and we try to help them out as much as we can now that we're in a spot that we are. So it's always cool. And watching these people's careers grow, like we went back to the conversation about, the people in the sport, watching people grow and change over, a couple seasons time, between, say, oh, hey, this is when they first started. Oh, hey, look, they just won their first feature or their first heat race, and you see these big moments and milestones. It's always super cool to capture and to kind of go on that again. We just had one of those moments again where we had Andrew Hammond, who just started driving street stocks in our area, or post stocks, or there's too many stocks in our area to begin with. But he captured his first heat winner, and we do heat winner flag pictures and stuff like that. And just like he was just so happy, so excited. So it's super cool to see things like that. Before we get off of here, this is probably like the longest episode of the Woah Show, but it's for good reason. We got one of the best in the business. I don't know if we can say a rising star because you're at the top of your game right now doing all these big cool things, but make sure you thank everybody that makes this all happen.
Oh my goodness, I'm gonna start out with, if I miss you, I'm gonna text you and be like, yo, I'm sorry, because I have so many people that have helped me along this journey that I can't thank them enough. I still will tell people and give them hugs and be like, dude, I would not be here if it weren't for you. So I'm going to start out with my family. If it weren't for my family supporting me on the road, like mom, dad, like we even get into arguments sometimes. They're like, they just don't want to see me. They don't want to see me do something dumb, but they help me put perspective into it. My mentors. So I'm going to go shout out to Dave Olson. Like, we met at the tracks with the IRA, and he is one of the most talented people out there. Nick Zebelian, he got me my connections with the Outlaws. I would not be here if it weren't for him. Shout out to you in Michigan, Nick. I talked with Cam. I always butcher his last name, but he's Altered Stock on Instagram. I'm gonna put a plug to him. God, every photographer I've ever met, I would not be here. We talk. You guys didn't discourage me. Like, that's the cool part about this industry is, like, I mean, you and me talking right now, like, that wouldn't be possible if we didn't meet at Marion Center. Like, you guys, we're all in this together, and we could even be on the same turn shooting 2 different cars. Like, that's the cool part is, like, we're not all focused on the same car, same point in time, same settings. You could have 2-3 people in the same spot and get 3 totally different images. So, like, we don't knock each other down and see each other as competition. We're here to just grow the craft, grow the sport. And like JC Norgard, huge mentor. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. Actually, when I applied for this position, I kind of snuck it under the table without many content creators knowing. And all of a sudden I got a message from him saying, you applied? Like, he got me into my first pace truck at World Finals. That will always stick with me. And that's where I actually met my new PR coordinator, Matt Skipper. So I just can't thank everyone enough. Like, all my friends for supporting me in this journey. Jordan Hattie, if it weren't for the Hattie family, I wouldn't be here. They were the ones who introduced me to the sport. My friend Maddie Schultz, who's also known as Chatty Maddie, our announcer, she has been a huge support. Her and both her and Preston, huge support in the industry, huge support to me. There's been times I've been between her, Dakota, Steve Sinclair. Gosh, can't thank him enough either. Like, if he wanted to give me the opportunity with the IRA, I wouldn't be here. So like I said, I could go on an hour's rant on how many people I have to thank for being here, because if it weren't for everyone supporting me, like I said, when I first started, I was a chicken. I would have quit a long time ago, and everyone just kept pushing me to be the best photographer I can. And goodness, I'm out of breath. Like, and I still haven't, like I said, there's probably 1,000,001 people I could thank. And you would probably have the world's longest podcast ever just on thanking people. So,
well, this doesn't, the whole, getting into all this, it doesn't happen by yourself. You don't just muscle your way into a spot. It happens, between series track people that get you into the races, and there's probably an endless amount of people that I would be the same exact way. I have a feeling that when I make my sappy post after our 5th anniversary race here next week, I will be sitting there and I'll be like, oh, there's another one, and it'll look like a freaking novel on our Facebook page. So I totally get that. Thank you so much for joining us. Means a ton to take out of your busy travel schedule. I know that this was a small window that we could get this in, so it was pretty awesome. Thank you, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
I can't remember all the fun, the late night barbecue, zipping